Well, we're in week 4 of High Noon, and on the very first day, I did an item on the programme which caused a lot of controversy. Not that I wanted it, but I wondered why 400 young women had their lives destroyed by perhaps, and I hasten to add perhaps, a reaction to a vaccine. A vaccine that has been, I think, uniformly accepted by the medical profession, but across the world questions are being asked, and I don't think we're asking them in Ireland. So I thought I would get an expert on the programme, and who better than the Professor of Paediatrics and Child Health at University College Cork, Jonathan Hourihane. Professor Hourihane, welcome to the programme.
Good afternoon, George. Thank you for having me.
Now, if I would just go all the way back to August the 30th, 2010, to your favourite newspaper and mine, the Irish Examiner, when Jennifer Hawke wrote an article saying cancer vaccine warning. Now, this was before Mary Harney who was then Minister for Health, had actually implemented it. And she talked about a lot of the stories that have continued to surface since then. And activists talked to the minister, and the minister decided, understandably, to take the advice of her officials. But one of the activists said to the minister, if there are no adverse reactions associated with the Gardasil vaccine use in Ireland, it will be the only country in which it has not happened. And we have 400 girls. So how do you react to that?
If you have no adverse reactions to a vaccine, George, it's possible that the vaccine isn't effective because an immune response is elicited by the vaccine. And the immune response that you're looking for from a vaccination is protection against the condition that you're treating or targeting. However, there can be immune reactions such as local swelling and other phenomena, but it's clear to me from my reading, since you asked me to come onto the show, and from my general background reading and my personal experience of this vaccine, that there's no increased incidence of adverse neurological or other side effects in vaccinated versus the unvaccinated background population.
But let's go to the HSE website, for instance. First of all, there is a group called Regret, as you know, which represent these 400 girls. Now, I think they've been sort of boxed off as some kind of, hyper people who are just panicking because their child happens to be unwell. All they are looking for is, one, that more information be given to parents in order they can make an informed decision about the vaccine. 2, that their children be given support in the awfulness that has now happened to them, and it's a little more than localized swelling, if I may say so. And that's all they're asking for. Now, the Danes, who have the same population as us and have 1,700 adverse reactions, have set up 5 care centres. Their government has put €1 million into an investigation. Why can't we do that?
I'm not speaking on behalf of the HSE, George, so I can't comment on what provision of services should be made for a group of people who have identified themselves as having been affected. I think it has to be proven that the cause and effect are related, or the identified purported insult, which is the immunisation, has caused the outcome which is identified by the families in the Regret group.
But if I look at the HSE website, it doesn't give me any information. I mean, it doesn't tell me anything about possible side effects. It doesn't tell me things to look out for. I mean, where do families who are thinking about having their child immunized, where do they get the information? Because I couldn't find it anywhere other than in the kind of websites that I suspect you wouldn't be very happy about, who are critical of the immunization program.
Well, I thought you might ask me where they get the information, and I've been onto the CDC website, the Center for Communicable Diseases Center in America, and the WHO sites, and the analyses that they have is that the side effects that are being reported by the Irish groups and others are not more frequent in the unimmunized group or less frequent in the unimmunized than the immunized group. So I don't think it's up to the HSE to draw attention to unsubstantiated associations.
Well, let me take a simple example. And remember, I'm a layman, so be kind to me. Isn't it true that, like with certain vaccines, you and forgive my words, but you kind of incubate them in an egg or something? Isn't that so?
The yellow fever vaccine is incubated in eggs, and the influenza vaccine is incubated in eggs.
So therefore, a person who had an allergic reaction to eggs, who suffers an allergic reaction to eggs, you wouldn't give them that vaccine. Would that be right?
You're completely wrong, George, I'm afraid. Those vaccines are safe for people with egg allergy because there's so little egg in the vaccines. Okay. And I've spent my 11 years in Cork trying to get local people with egg allergy immunised in the normal way, in the normal routine with MMR, because there hasn't been egg in the MMR since at least the early 1990s.
Professor Hourihane, don't shoot the messenger because I asked the question.
Well, my answer is as I gave it. We have to provide evidence-based medical care, and the evidence-based medical care around the MMR is that there's no egg in it. There's evidence that there is egg in the yellow fever and the influenza vaccine, but they are safe for egg-allergic children. So that's the question about egg is answered completely.
Okay, right. I'm glad. Now, if you then look at the Gardasil vaccine that we're talking about, instead of egg, yeast is used. So does that mean that you can give that vaccine to somebody that has a yeast allergy? So the same question applies, does it?
Okay, I see where you're going. The definition of yeast allergy is very hard to substantiate, and I'm an allergist. That's my day job, and I don't see yeast allergies. So people who say they have yeast allergies, it's very hard to prove that they do, and it's very hard to convince them that they don't.
I think it's important here that to understand that this program is not anti-vaccine, is not trying to take Gardasil off the market. But I do believe that given that every child will be immunized in national program, parents are entitled to information. Is that, you wouldn't argue with that, surely?
No, of course I wouldn't. I think parents need to be as informed as is possible based on the best evidence available. And the association of the effects of the purported effects of this vaccination are not supported by the evidence. So I don't think it's reasonable to expect the HSE to be required to report associations that are not substantiated.
All right. Well, it is a fact, according to the Merck Sharp Dome website, who are the makers of the vaccine. One of the things they suggest is that if your child has a temperature or is suffering from the flu or whatever, they should not be immunized on that day. Don't you think it would be reasonable to put that information in the public domain?
I think that's broadly available, and anybody who talks to their doctor or their public health nurse about immunizations will know that children often have routine immunizations delayed because of minor illnesses, where in fact such a delay may not be automatically or unavoidably necessary. So a lot of children with minor colds have their immunizations delayed when they should be really going ahead.
You seem, if I may say so, to be working from the general that this is good and therefore no criticism should be allowed of it whatsoever.
No, I think proper logic means you should argue from the general to the specific. So we're trying to take the principle of immunization is a healthy one. The world population is healthy because of large immunization uptakes. Polio's disappeared, meningitis is disappearing. If we have a problem with Gardasil, and I think it remains to be proven that the associations that are being made are causally linked. That's the only nexus of what I'm trying to tell you.
But again, in the Merck Sharp and Dome, and these are the manufacturers of the vaccine, they say vaccination is not a substitute for cervical screening. Now, we do know, given my layman's knowledge, that by and large, the preponderance of cervical cancer occurs in women between 26 and 40. So isn't there a danger that if we don't get as much information as possible into the public domain, that women may believe that a vaccine administered when they were 12 would protect them for life and therefore might put off cervical screening, which is not the purpose?
I don't think anybody's suggesting that Gardasil vaccination is going to eliminate the need for cervical screening. Cervical screening is identifying early cases of cancer, George. It's not preventing cancer. It facilitates the early pickup and effective treatment of a cancer
Correct.
that's there.
Yes.
So I think the two things are complementary strategies.
No, but my point is that if we don't put information out there that the vaccination is not a substitute for cervical screening, then people may assume that rather like, when like polio vaccines or measles, I don't get measles vaccinations now and haven't done since I was a child or whatever. Would you assume it's a lifetime cover? My point is that if the information isn't out there, then people are not going to know. There's positive and negative information. Positive is just as good, sure.
Yes, but information has got to have an evidence base, George. So the evidence for Gardasil vaccination-related complications does not stand up to medical and scientific scrutiny. So that information, it would be unhelpful to put that into the public domain.
All right. The cervical cancer was a huge killer, and it has continuously gone down before the immunization of children. Isn't that so? It was declining before the immunization program.
Well, I'm afraid I'm not a gynecologist, George.
All right, well, I'll give you the facts then. Between 1956 and 1992, American rates of cervical cancer declined by 60% because of smear tests.
Yes, and I could tell you that deaths due to polio have disappeared by 99.999% due to vaccination, George. You can get further down than 60% by effective medical interventions. And I think rates may be decreasing, but that's still 1 in 2 of those cases or the incidence is still just below half the rate it used to be. It hasn't gone away.
So the Indian government decided it was unhappy with the vaccination program. The Japanese government decided that it was unhappy with the vaccination program of the HPV vaccine. So are they hysterical too?
I would doubt they've made hysterical judgments, but they're probably based on evidence that is available to them that I have not seen on the CDC or WHO websites.
But the average, but with respect, Professor Hourihane, the average Irish mother or father, for that matter, doesn't routinely go to the CDC or WHO websites. They will go to the HSE website, which has no information whatsoever.
Well, George, you need to ask the HSE about that. The information you've asked me to talk about the complications of Gardasil vaccine and the issues about public information advocacy. I'm prepared to say that I think it's a good idea, but I'm not prepared to argue the detail with you.
All right. Well, let's try and let's just for the purpose of argument, okay? Let's assume that there could be some kind of connection. So why might that happen? Isn't it true that the transport, distribution, and storage of vaccines is absolutely vital to their efficacy?
I would agree, yes.
And studies have also shown that not all doctors and health specialists have stored vaccines, not this particular one, have stored vaccines in the correct way. Because as we know from our fridge at home, my fridge at home can very often be the nearest thing to a deep freeze, whereas your fridge at home, may be at a quite different temperature. So therefore, for instance, these vaccines should be stored in the door of the fridge and not in the body of the fridge. So they should have temperature controls. We don't know, because we're not talking just about Ireland here. We are talking about a worldwide concern about this. So therefore, shouldn't we be looking at other reasons why this might have happened?
Are you saying that the practice that you're talking about is what's called the cold chain for vaccine storage and transport? And I'm not aware that there's any concern that the problems that are being associated by the interest groups with Gardasil are related to defects in the cold chain.
No, I'm not. I'm asking the question. I'm a layman. These 400 girls don't have a voice. I'm trying to be their voice. Like, if 400 babies came into you and they were all sick and they were from fat, tall, every shape, size, colour and gender. And the only thing in common that they had was they were taking a particular food. Would you not say, I think we should analyse that particular food?
I think we would investigate the circumstances to see if the association with food is substantiated. Every second child I see who's referred to me with a food allergy, George, hasn't got a food allergy. So no matter what the public say about food allergy, half the time it's disproven when it's put through the rigor of a medical assessment.
Well, we're not talking about food allergies. We're talking
you
about.
Asked me about it.
No, I said in the example, it was a hypothetical. If there was only one thing that the 400 children had in common, would you not investigate that one thing?
I would explore whether the association was plausible. There's a concept called Koch's postulates, which is a scientific way of saying there must be a connection between what is being blamed for the disease and the disease being present. And if the cause is taken away, the disease goes away. And if the cause is put back, the disease comes back. So there's a scientific method for associating causality for, in that case, infection, particularly with TB. But it's applied to all parts of it. We have to show that the link is plausible. The link has in this case, an immunological basis that can be explained. And it's not related to other features of the person or the family or the other things that would explain it in a more satisfactory way.
Okay.
Sherlock Holmes would say, when you remove all the improbables, what's left is the answer, or something like that.
Yeah, I was going to use Sherlock Holmes as well in my argument, so you beat me to the punch. And finally, you're familiar, I'm sure, with the New England Journal of Medicine, which is the oldest continuing medical journal. Marcia Angel was for 20 years editor-in-chief. She said, it is simply no longer possible to believe much of the clinical research that is published or to rely on the judgment of trusted physicians or authoritative medical guidelines. I take no pleasure in this conclusion, which I reached slowly and reluctantly over my 2 decades as the editor-in-chief of the New England Journal of Medicine.
I would love to say that I think I should say we need evidence-based practice rather than eminence-based practice, and I think the difference is sometimes not easy to find.
All right. Thank you so much for joining me. The expert, Professor Jonathan Hourihane, Professor of Pediatrics and Child Health at University College Cork. I'll have a look at your text in just a moment.
High Noon with George.
Well, mixed reaction, but I also get texts from mothers about the issue of the Gardasil vaccine and the adverse effects. And I have a mother who said my 15-year-old daughter literally, as we speak, is bedridden after the vaccine. Yvonne says, my daughter suffered debilitating side effects since receiving the vaccination. It's devastated our family. When I signed the consent form, she says, I expected her to get help. There is no help for children now. Then, on the other hand, listener, you're being totally hysterical about the vaccine, says John in Dublin. Also, you are being rude to your guest. If being rude is asking tough questions, then I'm happy to be described as rude. Parents are given information about the vaccine. They sign consent forms and are advised to discuss concerns with their GP prior to vaccination if they have any. Does anybody seriously, why don't you look up the HSE website, which my guest seemed unwilling to do, and see what sort of information they give you there about this vaccine? Given that the entire medical profession has joined arms on this issue, what GP is actually going to tell you there might be an issue? Our own GP here, Ciara Kelly, on this very programme, told me it was nonsense. And Hook is mute on teen sexual contact causing cervical cancer. The reason I am mute on it is cervical cancer is caused by sexual contact. So in other words, if your daughter remains a virgin for the rest of her life, then she's unlikely, in fact, probably will not get cervical cancer. We're hoping to hear from the HSE on the information available on their website. And we have plenty, I mean, this is causing, as I suspected, a lot of reaction, not because I wanted to, but because I think it is an issue. Never listening to George Hook again. I'm shocked he is allowed to behave this way on national radio. Not everybody believes that, we're waiting for the HSE, who hopefully will contact us. But there are serious issues in relation to this, and the whole one is the website in which they claim to give us information. And how can we help you? Is the point of the webpage, and they don't actually do that. And I'll be speaking to the HSE shortly. For that, Dr. Brenda Corcoran from HSE National Immunisation Office is on the line. Dr. Corcoran, welcome to the programme.
Good afternoon, George.
You're not happy with me?
Well, I've only heard a little bit of your interview, but I think that some of the information that you have given is not correct.
All right. Well, I looked up the HSE website and it didn't give me any information. So what on the Gardasil or HPV vaccine? What information did you give me? Where can we find it?
I'm not sure where you're looking, but if you look at immunisation.ie or hpv.ie, you will be brought to a large amount of comprehensive information with facts on HPV.
Hold a while. I don't know anything about immunisation.ie or HPV.ie.
If you go through hse.ie and you look up, you Google HPV vaccine, you Google immunisation, that will bring you straight to the HSE site.
Yeah, well, I found that on September 2016. The vaccination is recommended by the World Health Organization, so on. So what page would you like me to get?
Which information are you looking for?
Well, I mean, I'm looking for instance, if I click on vaccine safety, for instance, right? It tells me how do I know that it's safe? And it says the HSE is guided by recommendations from the National Immunisation Advisory Committee and the World Health Organization. Where does it tell a parent that her child may suffer adverse reaction? Where does it say that?
Every parent whose child is in first year receives an information pack from the HSE before the vaccination. That contains a leaflet with information on the vaccine, and it also contains a consent form, and it contains a letter with phone numbers about where to contact the vaccination teams. That contains core information printed and is also available in a number of different languages or about the information about the vaccine. And it contains all the known side effects that are scientifically proved as being related to the vaccine. And it tells parents what to expect before the vaccine and how the vaccination is given and what to expect after. There's additional information on our website, which then gives the scientific basis and all the links to all the science and the facts about HPV vaccine.
Well, the Mark Sharp and Dome website says it is very common that there are nervous system disorders. It's very common that there are gastrointestinal disorders. It is very common that there are musculoskeletal and connective tissue disorders. It is very common that there are are, it mentions a whole pile of side effects. Why is it sort of said on your website, just as well, as my guest actually said, there may be some localized swelling. So people are familiar with localized swelling when they, from a child, when they got various vaccinations. Is there, the Merck Sharp and Dome and the Federal Drug Administration in America lists countless side effects, none of which are on yours.
The information that we use in Ireland is related to vaccine which is licensed in Europe. It's licensed by the European Medicines Agency, and we are obliged to use the licensed information. That information contains details on the known side effects, that are side effects that have been shown to scientifically be proven to be caused by the vaccine. It does not contain information about other conditions that have occurred at the same time or around the time of the vaccine, but for which there is no scientific basis as a cause.
But the Federal Drugs Administration closing statement on Gardasil reported that 73% of healthy girls who participated in the clinical trials developed new medical conditions. I mean, isn't it reasonable? All this group of parents in Ireland are asking for. Isn't it reasonable that A, they get information, and B, that if their child does suffer adverse effects, that they have support available? And they are suggesting that the HSE does not give that support. They're shuttled from consultant to consultant who tells them they don't know what's on with them.
I agree with you completely that parents need to have the correct information to allow them to choose whether they wish to get this vaccine. And I also agree that any child with any condition should be looked after correctly. What we can say, and this is again scientifically proved, is that there are no scientific long-term side effects from HPV vaccine. The vaccine is safe. There are girls who have developed other conditions around the time of vaccination, but for whom there is no scientific proof that these have been caused by the vaccine. That is not to say they should not be cared for by the HSE, and that is something that the HSE is looking into to try to manage the conditions that these girls have and to make sure there are proper care pathways for them. However, what we can say is that chronic fatigue syndrome, and some of these girls have similar type syndromes to these and symptoms for these, has been known for many, many, many years. Many years before the vaccine was produced and before the vaccine was licensed. And what we do know is that we have an independent health products regulatory authority who looks after and investigates any adverse events after any vaccine and any medicine. And what they have shown so far, and the figures, and these figures are also shown worldwide, is that the number of cases of chronic fatigue syndrome or any other unusual condition have not increased since we started to use the vaccine.
All right, well, I'll tell the parents that the HSE is looking into support systems for their children. Thank you so much for joining me, Dr. Brenda Corcoran from the HSE National Immunisation Office.
High Noon with George Hook.
News Talk 106 to